Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to see you all out on a chilly day. Another wonderful day in Gloucester. Fortunately, not flooding our streets as it was a few days ago. I'm Charles Nazarian, and it's my pleasure to be your host this afternoon as the president of the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation. Our mission is to fully restore this wonderful landmark building, which is on the National Register of Historic Places, for posterity. And it is an amazing building with a history based on the separation of church and state, of religious freedom for all, for equality. And that story is a long and wonderful story, and if I even began to tell it to you, we would never get to our program this afternoon. But if you'd like to know about it, please visit our website at gloucestermeetinghouse.org, and you will see a number of places, including an event called Refusing to Pay, which is now up on our YouTube channel, and you'll probably learn more than you ever dreamed about early Gloucester and why this building is actually here. This is our 8th year of celebrating Martin Luther King Day. And from the very beginning, our goal was to be truthful about our history, to bring people here with real scholarship, and to have people participate with authentic voices, because these subjects of race and equality in our country are not easy to talk about and are sometimes disturbing. We have a long way to go, but we are inspired by Dr. King and his vision and hope that we can help further it along in our own lifetimes. There are several thank yous that I need to make. One of them is to the events committee, which put together this program, and I would like the members of the events committee to stand, please. Heather Atwood, who is the chair of the committee. Jerry Ackerman, who does a lot of the knocking on doors for sponsors. And by the way, is a fabulous critic, because he was editor at the Gloucester Times for years. Karen Bell, Dick Prouty, Maureen Allward. I think that's the group. They've all worked very, very hard to bring you this program, so thank you so much. We also have 3 special sponsors for this program, and you'll see them on the cover of your program, but we are indebted to Action Inc., to Addison Gilbert Hospital, and the whole Leahy chain. I'm hard to repeat all of those names. And also to the Institution for Savings for making some special sponsorships to help bring this about. And in addition to them are our season sponsors, whose names are also on the program. And if you would give all of them a round of applause, I'd be very appreciative. As usual, we are doing this program not only live here, but also as a simulcast on YouTube, where it will be available to be viewed later. So we welcome everybody who is watching us online, either contemporaneously or in the future. Thank you for finding us on YouTube. Next, I would like to just ask if you have a phone or something that makes noise, if you might silence it so that we don't have something going on during the recording. And just a bit of housekeeping: if you haven't already seen the signs, if you need a restroom, it's through this door, and there are 2 more down the stairs. That's usually the most important thing I have to tell people when they come through the door in the entrance house. So I just thought I'd put that out there. Mayor Greg Verga is going to give us a short greeting next. Mayor Verga? Would you like it in the stand?
Charles. I don't usually make the big entrance from the green room, but I'm happy to be here. So good afternoon. On behalf of the City of Gloucester, I'm proud to welcome you to today's event honoring the life and work of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I want to thank the Gloucester Meeting House for hosting today's event and welcome Renee Graham and Gordon Michaels to our community. Thank you both for joining us. I also want to thank McKay McCaffrey, chair of the Racial Justice Team, for participating in today's event. The Racial Justice Team is a leader within our city, working to create an inclusive, equitable, and welcoming community. As we move into the new year and navigate these uncertain times, it is timely to reflect on the Reverend King's teachings and achievements. They can be used as a guiding principle as we work to overcome hurdles and to create positive change within our community and across the nation. We must work collectively as a community and to reach our goals and prioritize creating a respectful, inclusive, and fair city for current and future residents. Gloucester has officially wrapped its 400th anniversary. We've spent the last year learning about our storied history, diverse community, and culture, and thinking about the years to come. Now, as we look forward, I hope we can come together as a city to face the challenges that are ahead of us and work together to create a bright future for generations to come. We can learn from Dr. King's work and philosophy to be part of the solution and make a difference within our community. So I hope we will all join in the work being done to ensure an inclusive and equitable world and continue to connect with each other and celebrate our differences. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mayor Verga. Our keynote speaker today is Renee Graham, and there's a pretty full description of her in your program, so I won't repeat all of it, but most of us know her from being oftentimes on television and interviews on MSNBC. She has written numerous articles and books, and especially on issues of race and racism, of domestic violence, LGBTQ issues, discrimination, police violence. She is just an amazing, amazing person in terms of her breadth of understanding and knowledge, and we are absolutely thrilled to have her with us today. Will you please give her a large round of applause?
Just a quick correction. I haven't written any books, but I'm working on it. My thanks to the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation, Mayor Verga, and especially to Jerry Ackerman, my former Boston Globe colleague, for graciously extending this invitation to be part of your annual Martin Luther King Day celebration. I'm very honored to be here. Let me first start with a disclaimer. This is the first in-person speech I've given in 4 years. So I really hope I remember how to do this. You might have seen or heard the recent story about a Japan Airlines plane that crashed into a Japanese Coast Guard aircraft while landing at Tokyo's International Airport. In the video, you don't see the crash, just its stunning aftermath. The plane is fully engulfed, a fireball streaking down the runway. When that clip first aired, it was absolutely terrifying because it seemed certain that you were witnessing a catastrophe in which many of the passengers and crew members would perish in a fiery death trap. On the Coast Guard aircraft that was initially hit, 5 crew members died, but the Japan Airlines plane had a far different outcome. Even with some of its exits rendered unusable after the crash, every last person on that plane, and there were nearly 400 of them, evacuated safely down the emergency chutes and survived. Less than 20 people were slightly injured. In videos taken by the passengers, the plane's cabin is cramped, dark, and filled with smoke. And while the situation was chaotic, the passengers were not. They weren't screaming or clawing at each other to get to the exits. In that gut-wrenching moment, each tied their own survival to that of their fellow passengers. They cooperated with the flight attendant's instructions, which were delivered by megaphone since the plane's communication system had gone down. By choosing to do what was best and right for everyone, they walked away from what seemed imminent disaster. They were stronger together. In the days and weeks since, I've tried to imagine what would have happened if that plane had had a majority of American passengers. What would that escape have looked like? Would people have listened to the flight attendants, or would some, you know the ones who've done their own research, had decided that they knew better than those trained for these situations? Would they have argued with the crew or tried to grab their luggage from the overhead bins or under the seats, slowing down the evacuation process and endangering others? But mostly, would people have given a damn about the stranger next to them? Or would they have been solely focused on themselves and their own survival? I think anyone who lived through 2020 and 2021 in this country already knows the answer. And I'm not just talking about the COVID pandemic. I'm not only referring to the store workers who were assaulted or killed trying to enforce mask mandates, or the armed white men who stormed Michigan State House and demanded an end to COVID protocols and closures. As a side note, I assume I'm not the only one who noticed how much that raging mob in Michigan looked like a movie trailer for the January 6th insurrection a few months later. What I'm referring to is the great reckoning that wasn't after George Floyd, a black man, was murdered by a white Minneapolis cop who clamped his knee on Floyd's neck for more than 9 excruciating minutes in front of witnesses recording it all on cell phone videos. It wasn't long after Floyd's murder on May 25th, 2020, and the worldwide protest that soon followed when Denarla Frazier's devastating video capturing the last agonizing moments of Floyd's life went viral a day later, that we began to hear that dusty, vexing old phrase, racial reckoning. From this nation's largest cities to its most bucolic burgs, millions filled the streets demanding an end to systemic racism and institutional racism, and the state violence that allowed Derek Chauvin to believe he could execute George Floyd in public without consequence, and then say in the initial police statement that Floyd suffered a, quote, medical incident during a police interaction. A CNN poll conducted a week after Floyd's murder and amid the anti-racism protests found that 42% of respondents said that race relations was extremely important in their vote for president, outranking the economy, healthcare, and the coronavirus pandemic. A majority of Americans named racism as a big problem. As all of this unfolded, I mostly rolled my eyes. For more than 400 years, America has found every imaginable way to sustain racism. In a country where white supremacy is its resting heart rate, America has never reckoned with race. Not after the end of the Civil War and 246 years of chattel slavery. Not after black soldiers fought fascism abroad during World War II, only to return home to Jim Crow laws that remained just as entrenched and lethal. Not after 2 white men kidnapped, tortured, and lynched 14-year-old Emmett Till in Mississippi. Not during the height of the civil rights movement when dogs and fire hoses turned on protesters. Not after the beatings of freedom riders, the murders of civil rights workers, the bombing of black churches, or the assassinations of Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and the man we honor here today, Martin Luther King. It was King who said, "The largest part of white America is still poisoned by racism, which is as native to our soul as pine trees, sagebrush, and buffalo grass." But with the spirit of the ancestors who fought not only for their survival but mine, I held on to the faintest spark of hope that this time would be different, that something seismic and permanent would be moved. Dana R. Fisher, a University of Maryland sociology professor, hailed the size and diversity of the Floyd protest as what she called a good sign for racial equality in a 2020 essay for the Brookings Institute. Despite many reminders of racial inequality in 2020, the push for racial equality is clearly gathering momentum, she wrote. Protesters, progressive groups, and candidates demanding justice and fairness together are a powerful force for social change that has the potential to make some serious progress. I admired her optimism. I wanted to believe that potential and that the initial response was more than a way for people to break through the boredom of 2 months spent mostly at home because of the pandemic. I tried to convince myself that the protests were a rebuttal to an existential threat, not performative, and that many of those white protesters out there were there for more than virtue signaling content alongside their Black Lives Matter hashtags on social media. But that spark was quickly doused. We were promised a reckoning 400 years in the making. What we got was the overdue retirement of Aunt Jemima and some other racist logos and names that for a century perpetuated images of Black subservience and servitude. Don't get me wrong, Aunt Jemima needed to go. And all it took was the slow asphyxiation of a Black man under a white cop's knee for Quaker Foods, as the company official said at the time, to recognize Aunt Jemima's origins are based on a racial stereotype, which everyone already knew. For me, that was a defining moment of what was then a still nascent so-called racial reckoning. Black lives didn't matter as much as the green corporate America feared it might lose in the fraught moment. They met its fierce urgency with little more than a God's watching, look busy response, a cynical sleight of hand that looks like something but lands as close to nothing as possible. So instead of dedicated efforts to eradicate systemic racism and police violence, Aunt Jemima Pancakes became the Pearl Milling Company. Uncle Ben's Rice became Ben's Rice. The category Black Stories was launched on streaming sites like Netflix, and the words Black Lives Matter were painted in giant yellow letters on major thoroughfares in cities like Boston and Washington, D.C. Less than a month after Floyd's murder, 9 of the top 10 books on the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list were about race, racism, white supremacy, and anti-racism. It was as if America was suddenly cramming for a big test it had been willfully failing for centuries. This was not a reckoning. This was a thin coat of paint on a dilapidated house that, if you stood far enough away and squinted, might look like something new. But examined closely, you could still see every unpatched hole, every missing window, every spot where the foundation had given way. Nothing had changed. But forgive me, what am I thinking? A whole lot changed. School curriculums changed by banning books featuring and written by Black people, people of color, and LGBTQ people. Republican-led state houses passed into law legislation banning the teaching of critical race theory in grades K through 12 in public schools, which wasn't necessary because CRT is not taught in grades K through 12. Its name simply became a convenient blanket term to stoke white fear and prohibit the teaching of unvarnished American history that includes slavery, the Trail of Tears, Japanese American internment camps during World War II, the Holocaust, and the institutional racism that infects every corner of American life, from education and housing to employment and healthcare. The pandemic itself served as an up-close look at racism in healthcare, as COVID took a disproportionate toll on Black and brown communities. Not because, as one Ohio state senator suggested, the colored population do not wash their hands as well as other groups, but because of the lack of access, the persistence of pre-existing conditions like high blood pressure, and histories of unequal and unethical treatment by the medical industry. Many of the people who oppose CRT can't define it, but they sure enjoy talking about it as if they can. What many wanted among the protesters was an understanding of how we arrived at that perilous moment in 2020 and the history behind what happened to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and even to Christian Cooper, the Black man and birder who was threatened by a white woman who called the police when he asked her to obey the leash law in a section of New York Central Park. As you may recall, the woman was very explicit in telling Cooper that she would tell the police that a black man was threatening her. She recognized how, in America, that scenario could have played out for Cooper. Never mind that she was the one breaking the law. Oh, and here's a really odd coincidence. Cooper's encounter happened on the morning of May 25th, 2020, hours before George Floyd's murder. Had his situation turned out differently, it could have been Cooper under a police officer's knee. Instead of expanding this nation after one of the most arduous years in recent history, America mostly retracted. Republicans exploited long-festering divisions and made sure that white supremacy would not be usurped by the demands of protesters. Diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, DEI, in the workplace and schools that emerged after Floyd's murder are now being scaled back, if not outright banned in a number of states, under the premise that such initiatives could make some people, meaning white people, feel bad about being white. Republican Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt recently signed an executive order banning DEI programs at state agencies and public colleges and universities. In a very American way, dating back to the sabotage Reconstruction era of the Civil War, another opportunity for racial reconciliation had met a fierce backlash, one that has not flagged in the 3.5 years since the protest after George Floyd's murder. The reckoning got shipwrecked, or did it? The late, great Harry Belafonte, who was not only a beloved singer and actor, but a close ally of Martin Luther King Jr.'s, once said, "Movements don't die because struggles don't die." There is still an anti-racist movement in this country, and people doing the hard work to eradicate white supremacy. And make no mistake, that is the primary purpose of anti-racism work. But understand, this cannot continue to be a cross for Black people alone to bear. Racism has always been democracy's greatest threat because its persistence reveals America's promises of equality to be lies passed from one generation to the next. It corrodes the foundation upon which this nation stands. Martin Luther King said, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. So we must straighten our backs and work for our freedom. A man can't ride you unless your back is bent." So straighten your backs and work for freedom, and do so with the full understanding that your freedom is tied to my freedom. If even one person is deprived of their rights, we will all suffer because it means no one's rights are absolute. If we leave here today with a sense that something has been accomplished, then we will have wasted our time. Caring about these issues once a year or one day in mid-January does not a reckoning make. Talking about a reckoning is not a reckoning. The work continues all of our days, and not only when we are gathered here to honor a man whose vision guides us like a torch in the darkness. From its bloody inception, this nation has operated for centuries with one arm tied behind its back, thwarting all America could be if equality was embraced as an asset instead of with fear and portrayed as a zero-sum game. Speak up where there is inequality. Push back against the racist propaganda that you know is not true. Find your voice and use it for justice. To be anti-racist is to be pro-democracy, because a democracy available only to some is not a democracy at all. The racial reckoning of 2020 that wasn't can still be more than a faded headline or a forgotten soundbite. There will be difficult, even disastrous days ahead. But let that work start now and continue until it is finally done at last. We owe that to ourselves, our future generations, and to this country we profess to love, even when it is often not loved so many of us, especially Black people, in return. By committing to do what is right and best for each other, we can save ourselves and emerge, like the passengers on that Japan Airlines flight, through chaos and fire, alive and stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. That's stirring talk. Yeah, excellent. We're now going to have a period of question and answers with all of you in the audience. And what we will do is have people raise their hands, and I will come over to you and hold the mic so that you can give us your questions, and then Renee will give her answers. So, may I see a raised hand? No questions?
Awesome.
All right, I see one over here. I'll hold it for you, please.
I say this with some trepidation, but all of us good white folks who are here have absorbed all this stuff in our culture, especially the folks who grew up in the 40s, 50s, and so on, which is most of us apparently. What do you think we can do to actually somehow exorcise our own racist conditioning?
That's hard to do in this country, to be perfectly honest. It is. I think the most important thing to do is to point it out when you see it. You know what injustice looks like. You know when someone is being dehumanized. And I think if you know that and you see it and you do nothing, then that perpetuates the problem. And I think, when people get afraid, people are scared, people don't want to intervene. There's a lot of crazy people out there, nobody wants to get hurt. But you have to speak up. I used the example of, I guess it was like maybe 5, almost 6 years ago now. There were 2 young black men in a Starbucks in Philadelphia. They were waiting for someone. And the manager got scared because there were 2 black men in a Starbucks, apparently. And she called the police. And the police showed up and began to arrest them, began to question them and arrest them. They were doing nothing but sitting in a Starbucks. A white woman sitting nearby pulled out her phone and taped the encounter. And afterwards she said she did that because she knew that as a white person, and as a white woman in particular, the police were not going to bother her. So in my mind, she used her privilege to an advantage. She understood that she was not going to be hassled in the way these 2 young black men were being hassled. And it was a small thing, but it was a big thing because that video then went viral. And everyone saw it, and then Starbucks had all these training things, and everyone's supposed to be, wonderful. But the bottom line was that she did this. She put racism on blast as she saw it. And without that, we never would have known what happened to them. They would have been arrested, the charges would have been dropped, and they would have felt miserable. But there was this movement on her part, and she was the only person who did that. Understanding that she had the power and the privilege to be able to do that and get away with it. And that seems small, but it's not small. And that's what I mean by speaking up when you see it. When we're talking about, in some cases, it's just a matter of watching someone be treated the way you would want to be treated, or the way you wouldn't want to be treated. James Baldwin has this quote, and I'm going to botch it terribly because I am not James Baldwin, I should have written it down, but where he essentially says, white people know racism when they see it, and they know it in as much as they know that that is not how they want to be treated. So, when you see it, say something. When you see something, say something. I just made that up.
Another question. I'll hold it for you.
Hello, yes, I was just wondering, do you recall when Martin Luther King decided that the Vietnam War was part of the problem? Do you remember when that was?
I was probably 4 when that happened, so not in the original time, but I've certainly read enough books about him to know yes.
That's a very good question because the audio clip we have tonight is his talk about Vietnam from the Riverside Church.
One of the more distressing things about Martin Luther King in a way, and it's not even about Martin Luther King, it's what's happened since his assassination, is the way that so much of what he stood for and believed has been minimized. I call it refrigerator magnet Martin. You know, those refrigerator maggots you can get in Whole Foods that have like, you know, injustice anywhere, and you know, that kind of thing. But it never gets into the depth of what Martin Luther King stood for and what he believed. And people very rarely, I'm glad you brought it up, very rarely talk about his stance on the Vietnam War, you know, which was not popular among some of his most ardent supporters. They didn't want him talking about Vietnam. You know, they thought it was too much of a hot-button issue and it was going to upset LBJ, which of course it did. It was going to upset other people. They did not want him talking in opposition to that war that was already so divisive. What was your actual question? If I was aware of him in the Vietnam War?
I think he was in Chicago when he announced that that was a problem for black soldiers going to Vietnam. I think he was in Chicago when he made the connection.
I mean,
The
you know,
speech date actually is in your program from Riverside Church, April 4th, 1967, in New York City.
so an exact year before he was assassinated.
Exactly.
You know, I imagine it was a problem for black soldiers in the same way, well, in twofold. The idea very much of like what Muhammad Ali said, you know, of sending black people to kill brown people, you know, which was a problem in and of itself, but also the idea that of constantly fighting and putting your life on the line for a country that treated you horribly. You know, it's what happened in every war in this country, and everyone knew nothing was going to change. And there was something about the idea that this country was only so happy to embrace black soldiers and send them off to their death, but didn't want to deal with them when they were here and trying to get jobs and housing and to vote and to all the things that were really important. And so, you know, I wish people paid more attention to Martin Luther King's stance on Vietnam. People forget about it, his stance on a lot of things for that matter, that we're talking about again today. But, you know, he was a more complicated man than I think he's been sort of narrowed down to. I mean, you know, when you hear Republicans talk about King, what do they always talk about? You know, not the color of their skin, but the content of their character. That is all they know about King. And they use that. Ron DeSantis has used it. Nikki Haley has used it. They've all used it. It doesn't speak to what King really believed. It doesn't speak to what mattered to King and what King understood this country to be, but also where he wanted to get, the place where he wanted this country to go. And I think his stance on Vietnam was just one of that. He wasn't wrong. History has proved him right. He was not wrong at all. But even within his own movement, even among some of the longtime civil rights activists, he suffered for that, because that is not the subject they wanted him embracing, but they didn't understand the man and his mission.
Another question.
Have you ever heard the concept of a day dedicated to all those who died as victims of racial injustice? I think of the days we've had where there's reading of all the names of those people who died in 9/11, for example. There are other such incidents. How does that idea sit with you?
Well, if you look at just a century or so of lynching, that's over 5,000 people. Where would you even start? Where would you even start? How do you include all the people whose names we will never know, who died in slavery? You know, you know, and even if you could do it, even if you had a day, there would be so much pushback, you know? Well, where's the day for all the white people who died? I mean, that's the way it always goes, right? You know, I mean, it is, you know? I mean, I used to be a member of NABJ, which is the National Association of Black Journalists, and I would always have white journalists, some of whom I actually liked, who would say, well, why isn't there an association for white journalists? And I'm like, that's literally every newspaper in America. You know, can we get a few days, do you think? So, I mean, I think it's the same kind of thing. It would be very difficult to pull off because so many names will never be known. You know, and that's the tragedy of America in a lot of ways, that you not only took away their freedom, you took away their personhood. You took away who they were. You left nowhere for them to be mourned. You know, let's do a year of it. Let's do a decade of it. then maybe we can, maybe that's a good start. I mean, I don't think a day would just, if you even try to just do victims of police violence, my goodness, in the last 10 years alone, when I talked about Ahmaud Arbery, who was not a victim of police violence, but was certainly a victim of white supremacist violence. He was the young black man who was jogging in Georgia, and two white men just thought, well, he shouldn't be doing that, and they chased him down in pickup trucks and shot him to death for jogging, jogging while black. I don't even know where you'd begin, Jerry. I can't even imagine. I don't even know that this country can handle that level of grief. I mean, just to throw it out there, we lost more than 1 million people in COVID. Has that been mourned? We're still losing people. 10,000 people died in December. We're not a country that deals well with grief. We have a moment and we kind of move on, which is the mistake we made with George Floyd.
Another question.
Thank you so much for coming. And my question is, you shared what the reckoning wasn't. Can you talk about what a reckoning does look like to you? What would it look like if, I don't want an instruction manual, but what's your vision for the reckoning? Because to me, it's a really beautiful word and a powerful word. So I'd like to hear what, if it were right, what does that look like?
It is a beautiful word, but the way it's been rendered for so many decades, it's become kind of an empty word. There was a reason to hope after George Floyd's murder because there was such a reaction. Now, to be cynical about it, I also thought the reaction, as I said when I spoke, is that people had been in their houses for over 2 months. They were bored. They wanted to get outside and do something. And they could do something that also made them feel good about themselves. They weren't just out partying, they were out, making this great stance for racial justice. But that's kind of all it was. People didn't want to do the work. They felt like we have marched and we've done what we need to do and we've done what we can do. And they barely scratched the surface. They did nothing. Because when everybody kind of went back to their lives, when things opened up a little bit and we got vaccines and people go out, then there were other murders after that and other killings after that. And where were the crowds? The people who were closest to the pain were still out there. In those black communities, they were still out there. But all of those millions were gone. And where are they now? And that was what was really frustrating. I desperately wanted to believe that this was going to make a difference. And there was this kind of feeling about it. People started talking about Juneteenth. Oh, I forgot, we did get a holiday. We got Juneteenth. And, but you just knew it needed to be more than that. This needed to be institutional. And there were these attempts were made at DEI programs and looking at histories of racism and discrimination in hospitals and schools and all these other places. But where are we now? Affirmative action is gone. The backlash is just stunning. I have a cousin who 4 or 5 years ago became a DEI consultant, and she was so excited. She's younger than I am. And I didn't want to tell her, yeah, I think this is a terrible idea. You absolutely should not do this. This is a burnout job because companies never really stick behind it. They want you there because it makes them look good, but they don't want to do the work behind it. She resigned last week. I knew it. I could see it in her text messages, I could hear her on the phone. She wasn't getting the support she needed and what she wanted to do was it wasn't a matter of just like, oh, I'm just gonna bring in a bunch of black people. It was about, I wanna make this company better for everyone. I want this company to look like America. And people always say that, but I always feel like they don't have a sense of what America must look like because so many companies, and I include my own, do not look like America. And so, if maybe writing that instruction book on the reckoning, maybe that'll be my first book. I don't know. I wish it was that easy. I wish it was that easy. But you have to have this sort of full cooperation. You almost need a kind of Marshall Plan to get this done. And I don't know, these are not the issues that are being discussed in this presidential campaign. They were in 2020 because everything was happening in 2020. But if you had that same survey today, I can pretty much guarantee you that race relations would not be in the top 20 of what people were thinking about. Even though things are terrible, and even though you have who's in all likelihood going to be the Republican nominee, he whose name shall not be spoken in the church, but I'm just saying, I wish my mother could see me standing in a pulpit preaching. This would just be the biggest thrill of her life. But I don't know. That's the thing. I take back. I do know it needs to be done. I just don't know that as a country we have the capacity to do it because we've had too many chances to get it right. And every single time has been met with a backlash. Look, Trump was a backlash to Obama. So, the people who mean to do this country harm do not hesitate to turn the clock back and keep turning it back. Until we finally arrived at someone who said, "Make America great again." And we all knew what that meant.
Another question. I'll hold it for you.
Okay.
My question is, a movie just came out or is coming out, produced by the Obamas, and it's about a man that was in Martin Luther King's very important part of his thing. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Bayard Rustin
Yes.
is the man's name. Yes.
And he was gay, and so therefore Martin Luther I guess he was kind of pushed out. Do you think that was the right thing at that time? And do you think there is still a lot of prejudice within the black community to do with gays, or you think that's very much a different time?
Well, as a queer person, I think there's too much prejudice everywhere against LGBTQ people. And I simply refuse to subscribe to the fact that somehow black people are more homophobic or transphobic than other people. It's just not true. What happened with Bayard Rustin was there was a great competition in the late 50s, early 60s. The predominant black leader in the early part of the 1950s and probably from the 40s when he was elected to Congress was Adam Clayton Powell, Jr. He did not appreciate in any way this upstart preacher from the South suddenly getting all this attention and all these headlines. And so, he used to call him Martin Loser King, He said that publicly quite a few times. So when the march was coming up, and Bayard Rustin, who was this incredible queer black man who really taught King so much about nonviolence, was planning this march, one of the ways that Adam Clayton Powell wanted to shut it down was he essentially said, and I guess I take that back, there was a chance at an earlier march. There was supposed to be a march on Washington before the one in 1963. And Adam Clayton Powell essentially said to Martin Luther King, if you have this march, I will tell the press that you and Bayard Rustin are lovers. And so what could King do? He knew that would destroy the movement. The FBI was already all over him. He was getting all this pushback from, like Bull Connor here and this person there. And so he backed off. But eventually, the movement marginalized Bayard Rustin, which is why so many people don't know his name. Which is a shame, because there would not have been a march on Washington in '63 without Bayard Rustin. He was the architect of the march on Washington in 1963. I think King had to make this decision of, do I protect this one man or do I protect the movement? And he chose to protect the movement. I can't say whether he was right or wrong to do that. I wish he had been able to choose differently, but I don't know that he had. I don't know that he could have done it and protected the movement, because there was so many. The movement was already getting hit with rumors of being communist and being ruled by this and that. He couldn't afford to have that, what was going to be a massive scandal on his hands, and so he marginalized Bayard Rustin, who understood to a point, but also did not get the fact that the civil rights movement didn't understand the intersectionality of freedom, that you can't free one group without freeing another. And so you can't be pro-black and anti-gay. You can't be pro-gay and anti-Semitic. Those things, they don't work. You have to free everyone, because the funny thing is, anti-Semites, racists, bigots, whatever you want to call them, they always work intersectionally. They never just hate one thing. They hate everybody, right? And so, there has to be a way that movements understand the interconnectedness of equality and freedom. And I do think King got that, but I do think he had to make a choice between Rustin and the civil rights movement.
Another question.
Man, they got you working.
Can't go jogging in this weather.
Do you think he got it with respect to women?
Jean Theo Harris, who's this wonderful historian, calls it the great white man theory, the great man theory of history. And she's written books about this. And the whole idea that somehow there were all of these women, like Pauli Murray, obviously like Rosa Parks, who got very much marginalized. Because at the end of the day, the men in the civil rights movement could also be quite sexist. They weren't out there campaigning for women's rights, beyond the fact that, yeah, civil rights, whatever. But they weren't really looking at a women's movement or how women should be included. So there is this moment at the beginning of the March in '63 where there's kind of like a group of women on the stage, and they're all, because they wanted to speak, because they were also very much an integral part of planning and organizing that march, and they weren't getting the credit for it. And a lot of their names have been lost to history. Some are just starting to come back. Pauli Murray, who was a priest, a queer priest, is going to be on the back of one of the new quarters coming out soon. She's been dead like 30 years, but whatever. But those women were very much marginalized, and that constantly happens in movements for justice. That men feel like they're the only ones somehow who can get these things done or should be the faces of these movements. And I don't know that Martin Luther King did the best job, necessarily, of acknowledging the role of women in the civil rights movement beyond, someone obvious like Rosa Parks. But why wasn't Rosa Parks on that podium? Why wasn't she speaking? The Montgomery bus boycott was only 8 years earlier. So yeah, they dropped the ball again and again, quite willfully. This wasn't, we meant to include you, we just forgot to. They just did, that was not the image they were trying to present, which was really unfortunate. And it's that same thing, like I said, it's about, going through these things with one arm tied behind your back. Why do you cut yourself off from what everybody can offer you? It never makes sense to me. And I think that's what the civil rights movement did in marginalizing so many women who were sacrificing and working so, so hard. Gloria Richardson, there are so many names that again have been mostly lost to history because, the men who thought they were making a history and the men who wrote the books contributed to that as well.
Another question.
It's perhaps a general question, not just having to do with race relations, but when you think of the folks who were supporting a certain individual and that party claim that they are somewhat marginalized, they were never heard before. My concern is after all the hope, the dreams, the promise that seemed to come out of the 60s, Dr. King and his people and many of us here, there's a certain degree of apathy that's probably going to keep us in this vicious circle of repeated history of injustice. How can we overcome that other than we ourselves here speaking up whenever we see injustice? I fear for the country, in terms of our elections coming up. A lot of people feel in so many issues, why bother? It's never going to happen in my lifetime, my children's lifetime. What are your comments on that?
It's funny, my partner last night was in a weird state of panic, and she's like, if the worst happens in November, we got to move, And I was like, you know what, let's just wait, let's just calm down. Let's just see what happens, but let's not book our flight just yet. I think part of the problem is there is a kind of apathy. People can't believe, it's almost like it's happening in front of them and they can't believe it's happening. And what it reminds me of, and this is such a weird example, was back when I was a Metro reporter at the Globe, they used to have the city desk would be staffed overnight. And it was a horrible shift. I mean, it was you were by yourself. It was just you and a bunch of police scanners. And I would always ask, why do I need to do this? And they would say, because these were two things they thought would never happen. Well, was actually another example, why we always had to work Patriots Day. Patriots Day is not a holiday at the Boston Globe. And they used to say, well, just in case a bomb goes off at the marathon. And on the overnight shift, they say, just in case a plane hits the Peru. Because we never, ever thought that could happen. So we invented these extreme examples of things as why we needed to do, have somebody on the desk overnight. I think that's so much of it. People still feel like, well, I could still vote. We're not under martial law. How bad can things be? And I think they expect sort of, authoritarianism to come in one fell swoop, They don't understand the way it just keeps creeping in, and it's slow, and it does it when you're not paying attention. And suddenly you're like, oh, I can't say that, or why is that a problem? I think that's more, you have to kind of wake people up to the fact that this is real. I think we're beyond the moment of like trying to be polite about it, because that's not really working. Like people, what got me about the 4 years between 2016, 2017 and 2021 is I don't think people understood what was happening. It seemed amusing, it seemed funny, there was always something on TV, oh, he said this, oh, he said that. They didn't get the level of malice behind what was going on. Now you've got that same person literally saying, I'm gonna be a dictator, and I'm gonna get revenge, I am your retribution. How's that gonna work out for this country? I don't know what it's going to take to wake people up. Good grief, we had an insurrection. We literally had an insurrection that we all watched on television, but with the same feeling, like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this, I don't even know. I think we're so used to the way things are that we can't comprehend how quickly they can change. And that when we hear about a coup or an insurrection, that's things that happens to those countries. That can't possibly happen to us, except it actually is happening. I've always said that the insurrection was not a failure. It was a coup that's ongoing. It has never stopped. People lived through the same 4 years that we all lived through, and more people voted for him in 2020 than in 2016. People lived through those 4 years and went, wow, I want some of that. And here we are now, and people say, we want even more. That's strange. There's a part of this goes, that's just weird, But it's not weird if you look at the history of this country. The fact that, we had a whole civil war to eradicate slavery, and there are presidential candidates pretending that that wasn't the reason for the Civil War. It's perplexing to me. But you don't want the house to burn down before you realize it's on fire. And it's on fire. So I hope people can understand that. I hope people can get that. They could really understand just how much trouble we're in and just what an absolute, I'm in church so I can't say what I want to say, but what an absolute mess the 2024 election will likely be. The lead into it, everything about it. Like this year, we're going to be in for it. Like this is, it's like, what's the old line, fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night. It's going to be a really bumpy year. It's going to be worse than that. Because that's what a significant portion of this country wants. They want the chaos. They want the violence. And we're probably going to get it. But we have to figure out how to hold things together, how to hold this democracy together, because man, this is a stress test for democracy. And I'm not sure that enough people understand that and how much will be lost when it's gone.
We can take one more question. We can make it halfway, maybe. Here you go.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm curious if you have any messages specifically for the younger folks in or upcoming generations. I think I might actually be one of the youngest people in this room at 40, but I do see a couple of faces that are younger than me, and I have the extreme privilege and honor of working with a lot of transition age youth from this community. So if you have any messages specifically for them or for those of us that have the opportunity to create an impact in their lives, I'd love to hear that. Thank you.
You know, I have nieces and nephews now who are all in their 20s. And, you know, some of them are already very disillusioned with the political process. And I understand how rote it is to say so, but they have to vote. And I say this to them all the time. It's like, you know what? I've got maybe 20, 25 years left if I'm lucky. But you have to deal with everything that's going to be happening. This is going to be what's happening to you and your kids and maybe your grandkids. This is the stuff you have to deal with. You have to get involved. No one can afford to be on the sideline. And if you care as much about this country as you profess to, you have to do something. Everyone should be involved. But if you are in the younger generation, this is happening to you directly. You know, it is going to affect your ability to buy a house. It's going to affect your ability to go to college. It's going to affect all of these different things that are integral to your life. Your life itself is going to be threatened. I don't want to make it sound like I was this deeply politically involved person in my 20s. I was not. I was clubbing and having a good time. And so it is somewhat hypocritical for me to say to my nieces and nephews, well, do as I say, not as I did. But they have to. I think they understand that to a certain point, because they're seeing it, they're hearing it from their parents. And I know that voting isn't the be-all and end-all, but right now it's one of the best things we got. And I can understand completely anybody who is having questions and problems with Joe Biden. Believe me, I get it. But consider the alternative. And not voting is not the alternative. You don't get to sit on the sidelines and then complain. Because, I heard this in 2016. Oh, both candidates are the same. Really? You really thought that that person and Hillary Clinton were exactly the same? No. And look where we are now. Look at all that happened in that small period of time that we're now going to pay for generations. I think a lot of young people get it. I think when they realize there are things that they have, that say young women have fewer rights, reproductive rights than their mothers had, that resonates. It's not just this sort of weird thing that you think can happen. It happened. I knew lots of people who said, oh, no, it's going to be fine. No, abortion, that's settled law, Susan Collins. That's settled law. And it wasn't until it got unsettled. And that should have been a warning to everyone. Nothing is set in stone. You have to fight for your rights every single day. Otherwise, there's somebody out there only too happy to take them away. And I really, really hope that, in the primaries and come November, that, Gen Z, millennials, get that. I don't know what we do if they don't, because this election can't be won without them.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
We'll now take a 10-minute or so interval. Help yourselves to coffee and other refreshments at the back of the room. And there's also some meeting house bling for sale back there if you're interested in a cap or a mug or even a retro mouse pad. Lies and have some treats after this segment, so it's not the end of your coffee and social time by any means. This afternoon, we are blessed with having Michelle McCaffrey, who is a member of the Gloucester Human Rights Commission and co-chair of the Gloucester Racial Justice Team. She's a working mom of 2 and has lived in Gloucester since 2017 with her family. Michelle is committed to making this city as welcoming as possible. And this afternoon, she is going to share with us the results of a survey that was taken. And Michelle, take it away, and then the two of you will have a conversation, and I can't wait to see what comes out of that.
No pressure.
And following that conversation, we will do another audience Q&A, so you will all have a chance to pose your questions to the two of them. This segment will run about 40 minutes or so.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, Renee. I am so excited to be here and speaking with you. As Charles said, I am a committed community member, doing everything I can to raise awareness and make this place as amazing for my children as it could possibly be. I'm a member, I co-chair the Gloucester Racial Justice Team, and with our efforts, we were able to create more spaces on the Human Rights Commission. I then applied, and I am now a member of the Gloucester Human Rights Commission. And one of the things that we started doing early in the setting of our group was we decided that we were going to ask people what would be best instead of assuming or telling people what we thought. Out of that came our community survey. Over the years, we've tried to aggregate the results and use those responses to guide where we're putting in our efforts and our attention to address those issues that are at the forefront of people's minds. I would like to discuss some of those threads with you tonight, afternoon, so let's dive in. One of the things that we've seen throughout the survey is pretty consistent things that are coming up for people, but we've also seen over the last couple of years that there's more understanding and more accountability for what's happening in Gloucester. One of the most consistent challenges for our city is housing. There's not enough of it. It costs a lot of money. On top of that, some of the minority members of the community are racially profiled when they either try to rent an apartment, at the bank getting a loan, all of those things that we know happens in this country. You've written extensively about racial inequity, especially in the context of Boston housing market. Can you share your thoughts on how this issue might be addressed here in Gloucester and what roles many interested groups can play to further the housing options and improve visibility?
You know, I live in Boston, and I've lived in Boston a long time, so I know nothing about housing problems, right? You know, I think people have to understand and decide what they want their communities to look like. You know, people love to say a thing, we want this to look, look more like America. You can't get that if people can't afford to live where they work, where their kids go to school. They can't, it's not a workable solution anymore. And that's the case in Gloucester, in Boston, Massachusetts. It's a case throughout the country. And what's happening, of course, is that lots of people through gentrification, through a lack of affordable housing, are just getting priced out. And that creates a lot of problems in communities. You know, I was thinking about it as I was driving up here, and when the Globe building was in Dorchester, which is, neighborhood of Boston, there were a lot of people who had like crazy commutes, like who were commuting from the Cape, who commuted from Rhode Island, who commuted from Attleboro, because that's where they could afford to buy a house. They were worn out before their workday even started. So what impact did that have on the work they were doing? What impact did they have on their families when they got back home? Because they were just worn out, from all of this commuting. There has to be an understanding of what people want these communities to be. And people need places to live. You can't have, and we're talking about rental or buying. Rental prices are insane. Yes. And forget buying altogether. That's just not even a thing. The whole American dream, forget it, it's not happening. And that's a problem. Communities are stable when people can be invested in their communities by having homes in those communities. And they can't have that. And so something needs to be done to rectify that. And because so often when you're talking about housing problems, you're talking about people of color who are getting priced out. And so you have communities, and I've seen this happen. I live in Jamaica Plain. I've seen this happen in Jamaica Plain, which is kind of where everyone who couldn't afford Cambridge used to go, but now it's everybody in JP. And houses that were once, $200,000 are now going for $800,000. Who's buying those houses? Where's all this money coming from, right? But that's the problem. And so you've watched the community change. You've watched who owns the businesses change. It's part, if you're going to talk about a commitment to racial justice, then you have to talk about housing. You can't get around it. And we know that housing has long been a way that racial injustice has played out in America. From redlining, even to this day, the impossibility of people being able to get a loan. We've seen these stories where one person has their house appraised at this price, and they go someplace else, and it's a black family, it's $200,000 more. $200,000, you're literally cheating people out of their money. And so, I have, great respect for Governor Healy, but I don't know that there's any more pressing issue in Massachusetts right now than housing. It's where we are is not sustainable. It was bad 20 years ago. Even just in the years since the peak of the pandemic has gotten so much worse. And I think rent is up 20%. Who's got that kind of money? Who can afford that?
Yeah, especially when income isn't up 20%.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Like, income does not keep pace with housing. And so you end up with communities that become less diverse and in most cases a lot whiter, And that's a problem. And I just think people don't understand just how much racial profiling still goes in finding a rental or in buying a house. It's just, when I was looking, I remember I had 32% in cash to put down. Couldn't make a dent. My credit is impeccable. Could not make a dent. But a coworker of mine who has $150,000 in student loan debt bought a house. She's white. And I was like, I don't have any student loan debt. My student loan's been paid off for 20 years. I don't have any debt. I don't owe anybody nothing. But I couldn't do it, And that was one of the most frustrating experiences because I thought I had done all the right things and still couldn't get it. And in that case, this was 7, 8 years ago. This wasn't even about money. This was about, I think, who we were walking in that room. When you go in that room and you're the only black couple, you're like, we're not getting this, are we?
Yeah.
And like my realtor would be like, oh, can you put in like 25 grand more? I'm like, no, I can't. I don't roll like that. But that wasn't going to make a difference. We were out instantly. The bidding would start at 1, and by 1:01, we were out.
Wow.
5 houses, got none of them. Communities have to, town councils, city councils, mayors, town managers have to understand what they want their communities to look like. And if they don't care, they're just going to get whiter and whiter, and you're going to squeeze more and more people out. And then where do those people go?
Yeah.
It's not like they can go to the community next door because they can't afford that one either. You have, I think in Boston, like the black population is actually shrinking.
Really?
Because people can't afford to live there. But they're moving south. They're going to Brockton. They're going to Canton. They're going anywhere they can. But if they work in Boston, their lives just become that much more complicated in trying to get back and forth. So, it's, again, if you believe in racial justice, you have to get on your leaders about doing something about affordable housing.
And you have to vote.
Vote.
Another topic that consistently shared by our cultural minority committee members is the prevalence of microaggressions and how they experience them while living here in Gloucester. I'm sure readers appreciate your candid, empathetic conversations on racial microaggressions. I would love to hear about a time when your column served as a catalyst for deeper awareness or sparked significant conversation about racial microaggressions.
I think the best thing I've said about microaggressions, is that I just absolutely hate the term. There's no such thing as a microaggression. If it's happening to you and you're targeted, it's not micro, ever. It's not micro when someone asks, oh, but where are you really from? Which I don't get, because I don't sound like I'm from anywhere but, New York. But I know a lot of friends who do get that. I know what it's like, boy do I know what it's like, to be followed around stores. And I was in a toy store, and I wanted to buy, it's a long story, but I won't get into it, a toy squirrel. And so I found this little squirrel, and I had it in my hand as I'm looking at other things, and suddenly this one appeared on my side. And I'm like, can I help you? She's like, oh, can I help you? I'm like, you're not following me because I have a squirrel in my hand, are you? Like, you don't think I'm gonna steal the squirrel, right? No, of course I don't. Of course I don't. But then she didn't walk away. She still just stayed there. That's not a microaggression. And I will never shop in that store again. And I tell people I know to not stop in that store. And eventually, I will write a column about that store. It's not micro. No. And it happens all the time. And there's a sense, because when it's called micro, that somehow, oh, the person didn't mean it. Oh, it's a small thing. But they weigh on you.
Yes.
They have, every one of them has a weight. And it does make you think about things like, I'm not going to go to that store, or I'm going to avoid that person, or, you know, I'm going to figure out a better answer the next time someone asks me some incredibly stupid question. Because what they're really saying is, you don't belong here.
Yes.
That's what it always really means. It's never just, where are you really from? It's like, why are you here?
Yeah, it's a judgment.
It's a judgment. And so I think that's the thing. I mean, I respect the term, I understand the term, I hate the term. You know, nothing can be micro and be aggressive at the same time.
Yeah, it's like
that does not work for me. So I think that's it. I think people have to be mindful of what they say. You know, and sometimes people just aren't.
No.
You know, I go to the symphony, which I didn't do for years because I knew I would get microaggressed to death, so I just stayed away. And then the first time I went, you know, a white man was sitting near me and he goes, "So why are you here?" And I'm like, because there's a concert and there's like a dude playing piano.
I bought a ticket to see a show.
Right, and he's, you know, playing Mendelssohn, and I think that's cool, so that's kind of why I'm here. And then he just wanted to know why I liked classical music. How did I get into classical? And I just thought, here we go. You know. And at a certain point, he just kept asking questions, and I just started ignoring him. Yeah. And that way he can go home and say, oh my God, I met the rudest black woman. I was asking her questions, she just ignored me. But I mean, it's like that kind of thing. It was just like, why are you in this space that belongs to me? How did you get in here? And there's nothing micro about that. No. You know, it didn't stop me from going back, but you know, it is something I am worried about.
It's a barrier to you enjoying your experience at the...
It is, because you just, you know, you always have to, as you know, as a black person, you always have to figure out how much stress is going to this place going to cause
Is this worth it?
Right. Is it worth it? You know, and you could just, sometimes you just look and you're like, man, I'm not in the mood for this today. I'm just not, you know, you feel like either it's going to just make you really depressed or you're just going to go off. And that's bad.
Yes.
I mean, kind of, you know, but it's just like you don't want to always have to present that way. No. But that stress of it is you just know that there are certain spaces there's going to be a thing. I probably handle it better now than I did when I was younger, you know, because I've more or less reached the don't care-ish stage of my life. I don't really care what people think about me, but it's still, I don't like that negotiation you have to make with yourself, because you know that there are certain spaces where there's going to be more of that kind of behavior than others. And you just, you know, you end up just avoiding it, but that means you cut yourself off from things you really want to do.
Thank you. Consistent positive representation of racial minorities is also a challenge in our city. Our survey results highlight the desire for residents to feel comfortable openly sharing their culture, and members of the cultural majority also expressed an interest in learning about cultures of which they are unfamiliar. The Racial Justice Team, Human Rights Commission, and the Cape May Museum are championing and supporting events that bring joy of cultures to the community, such as Juneteenth and the Brazilian Independence Day. How do you handle the delicate balance of bringing attention to racial injustice without reinforcing stereotypes or causing further harm to marginalized communities?
I mean, I respect people who want to learn more about other cultures. I think we all should be open to doing that. I don't think it should be treated like a trip to the zoo.
Yes.
And I say that very much out of all the years of going to Provincetown as a queer person. And eventually they would sort of like bus in like straight people for the day, you know, because they were bored in Hyannis or whatever. So they'd bust them in, and they would kind of walk around and like point things out, and it's like, we're not on display here, we're on vacation, you know. And that's the kind of thing I mean. I don't want people to look at it as this kind of like a bug, you know, on a microscope. You know, you can engage that person, you can talk to that person. You can learn about their culture just by reading things.
Yes.
You can look things up. There's this wonderful thing called the internet, and there's all kinds of information available at your fingertips. I mean, you know, if you don't understand something, then you don't need to walk up to that person and ask a terrible question. You know, you can ask the question, just figure out a better way of doing it. You know,
Is this appropriate?
well, like there was this thing on TikTok, not that I'm on TikTok, but there was this thing on TikTok where a white doctor was talking about, you know, somehow all of his black patients always seem to be on their phones while he's examining them. And he just doesn't understand what that's about. And a black doctor answered him and said, you could have asked them, but instead you went on TikTok and mocked them. And maybe they do that because they don't trust you. Maybe they want someone else on the other line to hear what you're saying to them and how you're treating them. But he didn't bother to do that. He just went on TikTok and mocked them as though there was something wrong with them. And my white patients never do that. It's like, well, maybe they feel more comfortable with you than your black patients do, and you've now made them feel even more uncomfortable by doing this. You know, that's the thing. Like, it wouldn't have taken so much, and he could have simply said, hey, I was just curious, how come you're on the phone? I mean, you know, I want to talk to you. And maybe they would have told you, and maybe they would have told him something else, but maybe he should have engaged them more than just judging them and mocking them. And so I think that's the key. I think everyone should be open to these ideas and learning other cultures. I think we're better people the more we know. But there's kind of a right way and a wrong way. My work bestie is a woman named Marcela Garcia, who's a columnist and an editorial writer. And we sit next to each other and we amuse each other all day long. And she's a Mexican immigrant. She's an American citizen, but she was born and raised in Mexico. And so, but as friends, we have a safety with each other to ask certain things. Okay, if I say this, is this offensive? Is this okay? What does that mean? We can do that because we know each other.
We've built a relationship.
We've built a relationship to be able to do that. You know, and if she's going to write something about, you know, black people, about the community, and she will say, what do you think? And I'm like, well, as a spokesman for all of Black America, I think this is what you should say, you know. But I mean, but there's something in it that's really earnest. There are things we don't understand. So if I'm using, I remember asking her and saying, okay, Latina, Latino, Latinx, like what's the word? What is the proper word to use? There's nothing wrong with that. There's a right way to do that. But I don't assume that I know everything. And there needs to be a kind of delicacy in the way you ask people about who they are and what they do, but not in this way that you're already coming at them with a kind of judgment. Not that I'm against judging people.
You said something about looking things up on the internet. And a lot of people use the phrase, you don't know what you don't know. In 2024, I feel that the access to information is pretty readily available for people. And then the bigger issue might be people wanting to see or hear the information. How do you approach writing about the complex issues about race in a way that's more accessible and engaging for your readers?
I think I try to write the way I talk. I think I try to, you know, there are writers at the Globe and writers I've known my whole life who are just like really beautiful writers, you know, and I'm like, I can't do that. That's not my skill set, you know. But I can write conversationally, so I want to try to make the readers feel like I'm just talking directly to them, especially when I'm talking about difficult issues, and so. As a columnist, I have a lot more leeway than I had when I was a Metro reporter because I could write in personal experience.
Okay.
And so, you know, if I'm talking about what happened to Claudine Gay at Harvard, for instance, you know, I certainly know what it feels like to have the people in your workplace degrade you as an affirmative action hire because it happened to me with great fanfare in 1991. That takes the distance away from what happens. It's like, this didn't just happen to her. I'm putting myself as a representative. It happens to a lot of black women. It happens to a lot of black people. It happens to a lot of women. It happens to a lot of other people of color. It's like you get this idea that you're only there for this reason. And so I think trying to personalize what I write has always been really helpful. I avoided it for a long time because at a certain point you don't want your column to become a diary, you know. But I think it helps people. It's an entry point.
Well, it makes you a little bit more vulnerable and human, so they can see that you are also experiencing it,
right,
rather than just saying it's a thing that happens.
Like it lets me vent.
That too.
You know, and I felt a lot of that when everything was happening with Claudine Gay, and how quickly it pivoted from, you know, what people felt was a problematic response in her testimony before Congress about anti-Semitism on Harvard's campus to she's an affirmative action hire. And I think Reason magazine had something like, I think their headline when she resigned was, Harvard's affirmative action hire resigns. And she had been reduced. Everything that woman had accomplished in life had been reduced to that. That was their headline. A group of people sat around and thought, that's what we're going to say about her in this moment. I was livid because I knew what that felt like. It does not, and it said, it doesn't matter like where you go to school, or what you've written, or what you accomplish, or where you think you are in the world. You're going to be broken down to those three words: affirmative action hire. And so to put that in a personal context, I thought for me was really important. It almost would have been disingenuous not to. I didn't want to write with distance in that. And I think when I'm writing, especially about race, whether it's something like that or it's, you know, racism in healthcare because of, you know, my various family members and their various illnesses and all of that, I think it's important to me as a writer to give people a personal context for what I'm saying.
Fantastic. I spent some time at a local food pantry, The Open Door, and its sister organization, Second Glance, speaking with employees about their view on how our community is serving those in need. The generosity of wealthy community members was highlighted many times because it ensures that the great work of the organization can continue. But it brought up the realization for me that the bigger issue is the social structures that they're super wealthy people and then people who have not. You have so much insightful ways of helping the readers to understand structural issues. What are some key things to remember when having this particular difficult conversation about that serious wealth gap?
The wealth gap is a whole other thing. We can do all day on the wealth gaps in this country and in this state. And the problem with the wealth gap, of course, it just keeps getting wider.
Wider.
So it's hard to navigate something that keeps expanding. You know, you might get here, but oh, now the wealth gap is way out there. I think a lot of times you have to remember, no, one size doesn't fit all. You know, people come with their own lived experiences. And that's not always what matches the predominant culture. And if the predominant culture is mostly wealthy, then they're not really paying attention to what those people on a different plane are doing. And that's how people end up getting neglected and profiled and disregarded because they aren't here. And they can't get there because the wealth gap keeps growing, which brings us back to housing. But because the wealth gap keeps growing. You know, I think these are always really difficult conversations. The fault of this country has been not having them. Is somehow thinking that they can solve themselves. They can't. You know, it has to start with the conversation. It can't end with the conversation, but it has to start with the acknowledgement that these things exist. And so, you know, when you're talking about the differences, I mean, they used to be really difficult to see. Like they're not that hard to see anymore. You know,
definitely more prevalent.
You know, I live in a pretty basic neighborhood, and there are $1 million homes in my neighborhood. I don't really know how that happened. You know. And I know that they think differently about certain things than I do because they're not thinking about the more basic things that plague people who aren't making seven-figure salaries. I don't know. I think the wealth, it's weird. Everybody kind of wants to be rich, you know, who doesn't? But it just caused a lot of problems when you get so high above you can't see anything beneath you. Or you think everything is beneath you, I should put it that way, really.
Okay.
I just think we have to keep having these conversations. We have to. Like, silence is getting us nowhere.
Yes.
You know, silence, as we know, is complicity, right? We have to talk about these things, and we have to talk about them plainly. You know, I think what I try to do when I write is to talk about things as plainly as possible. I don't want to, you know, say, well, it's almost like this. No, it's exactly like this. You know, you have to tell people exactly what's going on before they can respond to it. Now, if they have the information and don't respond, that's on them. But I think what we have to do is make sure they get the information, you know. Hopefully they'll understand it and they'll make some changes, but people are gonna be what people are gonna be.
Yes, human nature.
Yeah.
All right. One of the challenges both the Racial Justice Team, Human Rights Commission, and those who have answered our survey is the pushback they receive from the white community members who don't see their own privilege. That's usually a knee-jerk reaction word. You've been very vocal about the issues of white privilege. How do you think we can effectively help those people see that the advantage of them is simply being in a white body and minimize the defensiveness or backlash?
Man, I've had so many vigorous conversations about white privilege because I've written a lot about it. And I was at a panel at BU, and this young man stood up and said, well, you know, I'm from a working class family, and you know, my parents worked hard and I didn't come from money, and what's my privilege? And I gave him the example. I said, actually, no, this was at Harvard. This is where it was. It was at Harvard, that wonderful place, Harvard. And I mentioned to him, I said, well, when you walked in here today, you just walked in, didn't you? And he's like, well, yeah, of course. And I said, I didn't. I said, I was a panelist and still felt I needed to explain why I was there. And I went through this whole, you know, I'm a panelist, I pulled out ideas, you know, because I didn't want anybody to stop me and mess my day up. It was that microaggression thing again, right? But that's the difference. There are ways that you exist. You know, I'm a big fan of CBS Sunday Morning. I've been watching it for the last 30 years. And it all depends who they have on. If they have on a black person, somehow race will always figure into their story. You know, what they had to overcome. White people never have to answer that question. And I always want to ask someone the question, or I hope the question will be asked, how has being white helped you in America? And let's talk about all the things, you know, oh, I did this and then I moved. It's like, yeah, you know, black people don't have those stories because we keep getting blocked at the door. A lot of women don't have those stories. You know, other people of color don't have those stories. And so that's what we mean when we talk about privilege. There's this thing you don't think about. You know, even just coming here today, okay, I got to park the car. Where am I going to put the car? I don't want to get in trouble. Where's the car? I'm thinking about this all the time because I don't want no mess, you know? But that's the idea of privilege. You don't have to think about these things. Being white is never used. It doesn't get in your way. You just do. You just go, you know? And I can't really do that. You know, my ex-partner was a white woman, and her license would be expired for like 6 months.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm like, oh, you get that? She's like, oh, I'll get to it. I've been so busy, I haven't had time. I won't leave the house to walk the dog without ID. There's no way I'm doing that. And I would just be like, wow. And I used to joke with her. I'd say, you know, the best thing about dating you is that we can now stop and ask for directions at night. Because I wasn't getting out of the car in some weird neighborhood and asking directions. No. But she would just, she knew that she'd be okay.
She'd be okay.
You know, and I'm always worried about that. That's the thing of whiteness. You don't have to think about it the way that people of color have to constantly think about it.
Yes.
You know, who is upset by my presence? What stupid question is someone going to ask me? In what way are they going to make me feel unwelcome? You know, and most of that's also because most white people are only in white spaces.
Yes.
White people are very rarely ever the only.
Hi.
Wow. Right? You know, I mean, and on one hand, I'm used to it because it happens every day of my life. It happens in the office I work in. It happens in the stores I frequent. It's the thing you're used to. And so that is the privilege of whiteness. It's not about money. It's not even about status. It's just about the way white supremacy leaves the door open for you all the time and make sure that your whiteness doesn't get in your way. Other things might get in your way.
Yes.
But that won't be one of them. You know, if you don't get a house, then you wonder why you don't get it. Oh, maybe, but I have to ask myself that question. Oh, did we not get the house because we're black? Because we were the only black people there and we made a really good offer. But that's something that generally the white people I know don't have to think about.
No.
That's the idea of privilege, not thinking about it.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way that I make a decent salary, I can buy things and not think about the cost. Not a lot of things, but certain things and not think about the cost. That's a kind of privilege. You know, I'm not making those decisions between keeping a roof over my head and putting food on the table. I don't make those decisions. I don't have to, you know. Between the two of us, we do well. That's a kind of privilege. But that doesn't mean I can't be cognizant of the fact that there are lots of people who do have to make those decisions and can't just decide, well, I want to go to Paris, but I think we'll go to Prague instead. You know, that's a different thing. We are having that discussion, by the way. But you know, that is something that is not a concern to me, but I need to be cognizant of the fact that there are people who do have those issues, and to acknowledge my own privilege in that way, the way that I want other people to acknowledge theirs.
Yes.
And by the way, and the funny thing about white privilege is, you were just born into it. You didn't do anything to earn the privilege. It just is. And that makes it even more odious to me, that it just is, as opposed to something that you had to work for or strive for. Yeah. It just is.
You'd mentioned this, your piece that you wrote about the former Harvard president, Claudine Gay, and the lack of support for people of color in spaces, and sometimes the utter defiance of them actually being there. I shudder to think that this work can be more challenging than it is right now, especially with a lot of the legislation that was passed and the things that, it's like people are retreating from the truth and the things that are actually going on. What are some ways that you can encourage fellow activists and allies to not get discouraged, not get enraged, and to not lose hope?
I think it's okay to be discouraged.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's hard work. It's really hard work. It takes a lot out of you. It keeps you up at night. Because you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for a lot of people who either aren't or can't fight for themselves. So yeah, I think discouragement, totally fine. Totally fine. You need to. It's a release. But I think for me, it's always considering the alternative. You know, like, how am I taking up space on this earth and not saying anything about this? I have a pulpit. Yes. Not as good as that one, but I have a pulpit. Why would I not use that to try to expose injustice and teach people something? You know, and maybe learn something myself along the way that I hadn't really thought about. I think that's the key. You have to understand what the prize is. And the prize is nothing short of equality. And why would anybody settle for less? You have to do it. And not to say that's not hard. I mean, you know, last year I had a few emails that were so horrific that they went to the state attorney's office. They went to the FBI. Wow. And that was weird. And I thought, who could possibly be that angry at me who doesn't know me? Right. You know. Right. And I kept, but I knew I couldn't change what I did. Like I could only do my job one way, and that's to speak the truth as I understand it, and to talk about history and why we are where we are. You know, and if I stop doing it, then it's like the terrorists win. Yeah. And I hate that. You know, so, you know, the work is hard. The work has always been hard. People have done this work for centuries. Yes. You know, we're just the latest part of that thread. You know, that's our legacy, is to try to make this country better. And I think that's, you know, not to get too high-minded about it, but that's a noble effort. It's important. You know, you want to leave that mark and say you did what you did to make things better. And if you didn't, well, you have to sort that out with yourself. But, you know, the work has to speak for itself. And, you know, and there are people I know, they take breaks. You know, because they just have to. They
go to Prague or Paris.
They go to Prague or Paris, you know. You know, but for their mental health, they have to step back sometimes. They have to, you know, especially people who have families and who have kids, and, you know, they have all these other things pressing on them. But you have to do it. And, you know, you take care of yourself. You know, there's a line from a Billy Joel song James, where it says, do what's good for you or you're not good for anybody. And so I always approach things that way. You know, where am I mentally at this moment? You know, what can I write about? What can I do? You know, how beat down do I feel today? But, you know, you get up and you do it because you have the opportunity, and that is the work. That is the good work to be done.
So we have Renee for, I think, another 10 minutes at most.
Yes, yes.
Before she needs to go.
We can
Apparently there's a
transition to
caucus
questions.
going on somewhere in this country I need to deal with.
Michelle, do you have another question for
I have
her?
more questions, but we can go to Q&A.
Okay, that's fine. And Renee, if you need to go in the middle of Q&A, that's okay. But we don't want to make you late. But we love having you here. Why don't we? Right. Why don't we take one question from the audience?
Yes.
And maybe we can go back and forth. Who's got a question for both of them? Okay, I see you. I'll hold it for you.
This is about when I went to graduate school, I got a work study at Indiana University. I didn't get my master's in art because my printmaking teacher there didn't like it, so I switched to the education school in order to get some credits to go back to the city and get a job. I'm from New York City originally. So then what happened is I took a little work job with a woman who was an art teacher, you know, for the graduates. And the title of the questionnaire was predominantly art students and classes in a predominantly white college and university, and versus the predominantly black students at black universities or colleges. So all I did was open up the answers from each college or university that answered, put down whether it was predominantly white or predominantly black, and wherever they put in a little black dash, I would number that, and I would take the answers of what they felt about their department. The thing that surprised me is that there were many colleges, universities, mixed or black or solidly black, and a lot of white in colleges and universities. I want everybody in here to answer this question. What colleges and universities do you think did not answer? And they didn't have to answer, but it was really amazing. Does anybody want to guess which colleges and universities did not answer?
Okay, so this is a question of which colleges and universities did not answer.
I have no idea.
What did somebody say?
Harvard, Yale, MIT, I've heard. Harvard, Princeton, Yale. Okay.
The Ivies.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Michelle, do you want to pose another question?
Oh, sure. Let's see. As an associate editor and columnist for the Boston Globe, what are some areas you think are the greatest leverage while propelling your work forward in 2024?
What's going to propel my work forward in 2024?
What are some areas that give you the greatest leverage when you're thinking of propelling your work into 2024? Based on what's kind of going on, everything.
Politics, really. The funny thing is, I was hired. I was at the Boston Globe for 18 years, and then got really burned out and left for 10 years, and then went back in 2016. My first full day back was November 7th, 2016. And I had been hired to write mostly, you know, op-ed, but write about pop culture. And when I got there that day, everyone said, "Oh, you'll be home by 8:30." And I got home at 3:30 in the morning. And I had written this beautiful column about, you know, how the nation was going to heal after this horrible presidential campaign that will never see the light of day, but of course, we know what happened. So politics has really become the thing. And all the offshoots of politics and all the ways that politics plays out. You know, politics isn't just elections. You know, politics is in sports. It's in pop culture. It's in every part of our lives. And so, you know, it's a pretty fertile ground to cover, especially during a presidential campaign. You know, which on one hand is always exciting, but but I'm also filled with complete dread at the same time.
It's a little scary.
Yeah. So this is my roughly third campaign or so since I've been back. And we've already interviewed a few of the Republican candidates, which was interesting. But yeah, it's going to be politics. It's going to be, what happens. And it's also going to be keeping an eye on what's happening with Biden. This is not just, we're not ceding this to Republicans by any stretch of the imagination. But, what is Biden going to do? If the numbers are true, and I'm not a big fan of polls, but if the numbers are true, he's got a climb ahead of him. And he's going to need to try to re-engage communities where his support is flagging, and some communities he might have lost entirely. And so it's going to be, for me, really keeping an eye on that and what comes of that. But also that underlying violence that the FBI keeps talking about and DOJ keeps talking about, and what's going to happen with all of these various court trials and how people will react to those things. And it's going to be a hard year.
It's a little volatile.
Yeah, I mean, much more so than 2020, which was already kind of a mess. But the other funny thing is, with 2020, we were home. We weren't really out and about. We were all, in lockdown at home. And this time we're going to be out, be able to travel and go to primaries and all of that. So yeah, there's a part of me that's very much looking forward to it. But I dread how dark things are going to become in the next 10 months. Not to mention what happens after it,
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
We can probably take one more question from the audience. I think this gentleman's hand went up first.
Thank you both for the questions and the answers. So, given what we've been talking about and what we are living through, and especially what you were just saying, which echoed some things you said earlier, Renee, about violence. And since Dr. King and Bayard Rustin were proponents of nonviolence, at least for part of their efforts, are we done with nonviolence in terms of an approach to change because of how scary and effective the verbal and physical violence is in the country?
I hope not.
I mean, I think there was a side that was never nonviolent. I think the people who were always violent will continue to be violent and will see violence as their answer. Because in their minds, violence works. You threaten people, you intimidate them. We know all the things that are happening with people getting doxxed, which is, someone putting all of your information, where you live, your phone number, where your spouse works, where your kids go to school, online. We've seen swatting attacks where, someone calls the police and said, oh my God, there's a shooting in that house, and the police show up with guns drawn. It's been happening to some of the judges who are overseeing some of the various cases that are garnering a lot of attention these days. I think people have a right to defend themselves. I think if you come for me, I'm coming for you. But I don't know that we can just sort of kill our way through this. It's just not an answer. And again, but we have to decide who we want to be in this fight. Because the other side has already decided what they want to be. And they're not hesitating, And even if they're doing it through something indirect like swatting, they're still attempting to get someone hurt. They're still attempting to disrupt. And if people think swatting is harmless, about 10 years ago, there was a swatting attack on a young man's house in Missouri. And someone had called the cops and said, oh, there's been a mass shooting in his house. And the cops showed up, and he heard all the commotion, and he opened his front door, and the cops shot him dead in front of his mother. So, I feel like we're entering a really scary era of violence, and where it's open, and it's being endorsed by a presidential candidate. And so we're going to have to ask ourselves some long, hard questions about what our response to that is going to be. It can be nonviolent, but at what point, where does self-defense come into that? I want to be Bayard Rustin here, I really do. But I think that things are that much more difficult because of, you've had presidents who've done nothing during violence. You've never had the potential of a president who's encouraging it, who already did that, and we saw where that went, right? and we know that if it happens again, it will be worse. It's dark. It's scary. It's a volatile time. It's a perilous time. Unlike I think any I've seen in my lifetime. I've seen bad stuff, but nothing where I feel this sort of level of fear of how bad things will get, and that the insurrection again was just, that was a Sunday school meeting compared to what might happen going forward. Glad I could cheer you up. I know.
All right, I think we should say thank you to you both.
Thank you.
We'll take another 10-minute or so break.
Say one more thing.
You have one more. Oh, go ahead.
I invite you to take our 2024 Gloucester Community Belonging Survey. The QR codes are on the doors on the way out. We want to continually get your feedback and information so that we can tailor our efforts moving forward. So thank you, Renee.
Great. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you've enjoyed this afternoon and you love what we do at the Meeting House, and if you're not yet a member of the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation, or you haven't renewed yet, please consider going online and renewing or being a new member for 2024. We rely on your memberships for our operating funds. We get grants for things such as the upcoming work out on the green, but those funds can't be used for our regular operating funds to keep everything going. So please visit us at gloucestermeetinghouse.org, and you can also find a link if you want to hear this program again or links to other programs that we've done over the past many years. This particular evening, we are blessed in having Gordon Michaels with us. Gordon is no stranger to Gloucester, and especially to the Meeting House. He has sung here a number of times, and it is always a great pleasure to have him. I found a few words about him online, which I think perfectly capture him. Powerful is a word that most people would use to describe his smooth baritone voice. His delivery seems almost effortless, and his stylistic range is diverse, including Broadway ballads, jazz standards, blues, R&B oldies, gospel, and even some country. Every now and then. But we are absolutely thrilled to have him, and when I asked him to do this, he said, well, what do y'all want me to sing? And I said, well, how about you choosing music from the Black Experience? And he said, what's that? And I said, you tell me. So this afternoon, we're going to get the answer. So, Gordon, whenever you're ready, we're delighted to have you.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? Okay, so those who don't know me, I run all of these shows and concerts like a Black Baptist church. And I'm Baptist-costal. That's Baptist by morning service, Pentecostal by night revival. Which means I need you to talk back to me. That call and answer thing. So how's everybody doing? I know there's no liquor here because we're in the church, but you know, you gotta still act like you're having a good time. You know, I came a long way all the way from Dorchester to come up here, so my concert tonight of the Black Experience, so Charles calls it, is I'm taking you through a journey of things that African Americans have contributed to all the different genres of music. So that, of course, is a rendition of the Lord's Prayer, which I'm putting in spirituals because the Lord's Prayer song was done way back in the day. But instead of doing the one that they always do in church, I had to throw a little chili powder on it, you know, so we spruce it up just a little bit. But we're going to take you back to the old Negro spirituals, and then we're going to move into the blues, and then we're going to move into jazz, and then we're going to move into oldies R&B, and then we're going to do Broadway, and then we're going to close with gospel. Is that all right? So I'm going to give you a little taste of each thing. They try to put me in a box and say I'm a certain type of singer. I will always disprove that. I can say whatever I feel like singing, especially since I came here on an opera scholarship, but I got my degree in musical theater. So this next number, you can sing on this one because it's a spiritual and it's audience participation, and this is Wade in the Water. I know you know the words. I'll point to you when it's time for you to sing. All right? Okay. And we all sing this chorus. Ready? Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Children, wade in the water. God knows the trouble. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Children, wade in the water. God knows the trouble. Water. I said, who is the man on present wise? God knows the trouble. Water. I said, it must be one of the Israelites. God knows the trouble. Water. You say, wade in the water. Wade in the water. Children, wade in the water. God knows the trouble. Water. Again, wade in the water. Wade in the water. Children, wade in the water. God knows the trouble. Water. I said, who is the man on the present rail? God knows the trouble. Water. I said, it must be the man that Moses led. God knows the trouble. Water. I said, wade in the water. Wade in the water. Children, wade in the water. God knows the trouble. Water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Children, wade in the water. God knows the trouble. Water. I said, who are the children on present land? God knows the trouble. Water. I said, it must be the ones who are headed back. God knows the trouble. Water. Come on. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Children, wade in the water. funny, be happy. So I'm gonna give you a little of both. So we're gonna start out with this wonderful blues ballad written by Fats Waller, made famous by the late great Mel Carter. It seems to me you love to see me pray. I don't know where, but I feel each night when you say you'll phone, you don't. And I'm left alone, singing the blues and saying, you treat me coldly each day. You always scold me whenever somebody is near. Oh, there, now it must be great fun to be mean to me. You shouldn't forget, you see, what you mean to me. John on the saxophone. probably one of the sadder blues songs, but I do love it. Not sure I completely identify with it because I don't let too many people be nasty to me without me cussing them out. So I can only somehow relate to that from other people's stories. But this one, I could definitely relate to. This is a blues story about somebody who left me. It's early in the morning and I can't get right. I had a little date with my baby last night and now it's early. It's early in the morning, yes. It's early in the morning and I ain't got nothing but the blues, yes. I went to all the places where she used to go. I even went to her house, but she don't live there anymore. Now it's early. It's early in the morning, yes. It's early in the morning and I ain't got nothing but the blues, yeah. Well, after looking for her and I couldn't find her, what do? You go see some of her friends or her family, right? So I went to see a friend of hers, but she was out, knocking on her mama's door, and she began to shout, "Get away from here, boys! Don't you know what time it is?" I know, I said I know. It's early in the morning and I ain't got nothing but the blues, yeah. Well, after I run around looking for her, I got hungry. So I had to go find something to eat. You know what I did? I went to Alpino's and get something to eat. That waitress looked at me and she said, "Homeboy, you sure look me." I said, well, that's funny, because I didn't see none of your lip on this menu. Yeah. Early in the morning and I ain't got nothing but the blues, yeah. When I had a lot of money when I started out, I could not find my baby and my money's run out. It's early in the morning. It's early in the morning and I ain't got nothing but the blues. They didn't hear me, I need to say it again. It's early in the morning and I ain't got nothing but the blues, yeah. Well, if anybody asks me what about me and you, I'm gonna tell them I don't know what to do with the blood. Early in the morning. It's early in the morning and I ain't got nothing but the blues, yes. They didn't hear me. It's early in the morning and I ain't got nothing but the blues, yes. It's early in the morning and nothing but the oh, I ain't got nothing. That's the fun blues right there. That was Mr. Lou Jordan, also from the musical Five Guys Named Mo. Anybody see that musical? Y'all don't have enough African American plays up here in Boston. Y'all try to get it next month for Black History Month. You'll be fine. No, it's a great musical. I did have the pleasure of being in it 3 times, so that was great. So now we're going to do, that was blues, we're going to jazz. And can't do jazz without doing some Billie Holiday. Oh, that sounds good. Them that's down, sharing again. Them that's down, sharing. So the Bible says, and it still is new. Your mama may have, your papa may have, but God bless that child that's got it all. That God is old. I only sing that song for that note, just so you know. Yes, the strong, they get more, while the weak ones fail. If they look and stay on, never make the grave. Your mama may have, your papa may have, but God bless that child that's got his own. That God is old. Money, you got lots of friends. They play around that old crust of bread and such. You can help yourself, but don't take too much. Your mama may have, your papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own. That's got his own. Take care. Billie Holiday. So when I started picking the songs for this program and thinking about Martin Luther King and how much us as black people had to overcome, I think about these songs, how you have to be self-reliant, how you have to believe in yourself, how you have to, when everybody else is against you, you still have to stand your ground. And so songs like God Bless the Child and a couple of others that I'm doing a little later in the program stuck out in my head when it came to giving you a journey through black music, through all the genres that we have contributed to. So this next one, of course, big band leader, Mr. Duke Ellington. That was too many notes. You're supposed to give me one note. Thank you. Very much name that tune. I can name that tune in one note. You want to give me 5 and 6. He knows that confuses me. I missed the Saturday day. Birthday crowd in the floor. I couldn't bear it without you. Don't get around much anymore. I wanna visit the club. Got as far as that door. They have asked me about you. Don't get around much anymore. Well, darling, I guess I'm much more ready. And nevertheless, my terrible memories. I've been invited on dance. I could have gone, but what for? Yes, awfully different without you. Don't get around much anymore. Come on, Michael, give me some. Give it up for Michael Carson. I almost feel like I'm at the symphony. Y'all are so polite and quiet. My audiences in the city are usually drunk and rowdy. I like them too, though, because when they're drunk, they give me bigger tips. So, you know, it has its trade-offs. This next one, we're moving from jazz now to oldies R&B. And so we're going to dive right in with a little bit of the Drifters. Because, you know, who doesn't love the Drifters? Most of us grew up on that. And I am a big fan of Benny King, who was the lead singer for the Drifters, which I always thought was really funny. He got paid twice. He sang lead in the Drifters and got paid. Then he left the Drifters and recorded all the same music and got paid again. I was like, how come I can't do that? Can I record somebody else's music and get paid twice? This is a little Under the Boardwalk, and so y'all all know this, and so we need you to sing on the Under the Boardwalk part, or it doesn't work, because I can't sing the chorus and the lead. So y'all, my new gospel choir, Gloucester's Mass Gospel Choir right here. And y'all are gonna sing the background. Is that all right? I'm not answering, is that all right? Okay, ready? Oh, when the sun goes down and burns a tar upon the roof, and your shoes get so hot, your tired feet will find a groove. Give it up for my band. So we have Michael on piano, Ken on bass, John on sax, and James on drums. No, they're not like Madonnas or Chers, or they all have last names. I just don't know them all, or I can't pronounce them. So I just go by first names because that's what I know. So, and I don't mess up first names. So this next one is also really taking y'all way back now. Show we're gonna do a little Frankie Lyman. Is it Frankie Lyman or is it Little Candy? Frankie Lyman. You can sing it with me, I know you know. Why do fools fall in love? Why do birds sing so gay? And lovers away the break of day. Why do they fall in love? Why does the rain fall above? Why do fools fall in love? Why do they fall in love? Love is a losing game. Love can be a shame. I know a fool has seen for that foolish mean can be Tell me why, Come on. You know they made a movie out of that song, right? Supposedly Frankie Lyman had a couple of wives, like 3. And then he died, and everybody wanted the money. And they were all fighting each other in court. That's why they want to know why fools fall in love. I just stay single. But it don't matter, I ain't got no money to fight over anyway, so. Anyhow, we're gonna move to Broadway if that's all right. We're getting to the close of our program, and I don't wanna keep you here later than you're supposed to be. So, when we go to Broadway, for the longest time, African Americans didn't have a place on Broadway. And I had the fortune of being in 9 different productions of the second song I'm gonna sing, which was a musical written by Fats Waller. But one of the latest Broadway musicals that was on Broadway outside of Hamilton was the musical The Color Purple, which they just did the movie musical version of. And if you haven't seen it, it's very beautiful, it's very moving. Probably some of the strongest female positivity you will find in a movie in a very, very long time. even though the storyline part of it is hard to watch, but the outcome is amazing. And this song talks about how you have to believe in yourself, and no matter what people think about you, you have to always remember that you have self-love, and you don't need someone else to love you to be counted. And so this song is the main closing number that Fantasia sings. It's entitled, I'm Here. Don't need you to love me. I don't need you to love. I've got my sister. I can feel her now. She may not be here, but she's still mine. I know she still loves me. I got my children. I can't hold them now. They may not be here, but they still mine. I hope they know I still love them. Got my house, it still keep the cold out. Got my chair when my body can hold out. Got my hands doing good like they're supposed to. Showing my heart to the folks that I'm close to. Got my eyes so they don't see as far now. They see more about how things really are. Take a deep breath. Gonna hold my head up. Gonna push my shoulders back and look you straight in the eye. I'm gonna flirt with somebody. I know when they walk by, I'm gonna see. I'm beautiful. Yes, I'm beautiful. And I'm here. song since I saw it on the Broadway stage, and I saw it 12 times. That's right, 12 times. I kept scraping up my pennies. I was like, woo! They got a sale, I'm going down to New York! So this is from the musical Ain't Misbehaving, the title cover, my rendition. I'm always misbehaving, so I figured this is a very appropriate song for me. No one to worry, all by myself. No one to tell me when I'm weary on the shelf. Ain't misbehaving. I'm saving all of my love for you, and you, and you, and you too. I know for certain, yes, the one that I'm through when flying is in ain't misbehaving. I'm saving all of my love for you. Lying that corner in the corner, he don't go nowhere, but what do I care? Your kisses are worth waiting for, baby. I don't stay out late. No, I don't care to go. I'm home about 8, 'cause me and my neighbor radio, I can't afford one. Ain't misbehaving. I'm saving all my love for you. No one to walk with all by myself. No one to talk with, but I'll let me on myself. And misbehaving, I'm setting my love for you. And you too. I know for certain that's the one that I love. I'm through with flying and it's you that I'm thinking of. And misbehaving and saving all of my love for you. Yes. Like the corner, in the corner. Don't go nowhere, but what do I care? Your kisses are I'm ready for, baby. I don't stay out there and I don't care to go. I'm on about it, just me and the radio. It was me and yes. It was me and yes. It was me and I'm saving all of my love for you. And you know that's right. All right, give it up for my band back here. I love when I come to Gloucester, I know how to do it right up here. And I'm at home, it's just me and Michael. This is strange playing with all these extra pieces. I was like, I ain't never heard that before. Is that what it does when you got a full band? Y'all sound great. We can go on the road one day. Coming to the close of the program, and I'm on time. I'm very much on time. This is a Martin Luther King celebration, so we're going to do Martin Luther King's favorite song, Precious Lord. stand. I am weak and I am tired and I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me home to the light. Precious Lord, take my hand and lead me home. Take it on. Lord, come take my hand, want to lead me on and help me stand. You know that I'm weak and I am so tired. Lord, I'm worn. Oh yes, I'm worn. But through the storm, through the night, lead me home to the light. Precious Lord, won't you take my hand and lead me home? Precious Lord, take my hand and lead me home. Mary Anderson and the Harry Jackson Colson. Again, I'd like to thank each and every person who came out tonight. I hope that you had a great program. I know it was long and a lot of stuff that happened here. I want to thank Charles and Ross Evening Friends for putting me up here for a long time. Michael on the piano, Peter on bass, Ron on sax, and James on the drums. We're going to close out with a little bit of the line. Let's go out of the line. I'm gonna let it shine, oh, let's go out of line. I'm gonna let it shine, let's go out of line. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All in this place, all in this place. I'm gonna let it shine, oh, all in this place. I'm gonna let it shine. All in this place, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All over the world, we're gonna let it shine. Oh, all over the world, we're gonna let it shine. All over the world, we're gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let
we have about a 5-minute clip of Dr. King from his Vietnam speech. Coming after this, we're going to dim the lights. For those of you who would like to stay, the lights will slowly dim and we'll bring up Dr. King's words. And then those who would like to ring the Paul Revere bell can join me up in the gallery after Dr. King's finished speaking, and we can ring the bell as everybody leaves. So we'll let the band wind it down, move a couple pieces, and then we'll have Dr. King.
I come to this magnificent house of worship tonight because my conscience leaves me no other choice. I join you in this meeting because I am in deepest agreement with the aims and work of the organization which has brought us together, clergy and laymen concerned about Vietnam. The recent statements of your executive committee are the sentiments of my own heart, and I found myself in full accord when I read its opening lines. A time comes when silence is betrayal. I suppose it is not surprising that I have 7 major reasons for bringing Vietnam into the field of my moral vision. That is, at the outset, there are obvious and almost facile connections between the war in Vietnam and the struggle I and others have been waging in America. A few years ago, there was a shining moment in that struggle. It seemed as if there was a real promise of hope for the poor, both black and white, through the poverty program. There were experiments, hopes, new beginnings. Then came the build-up in Vietnam, and I watched this program broken and eviscerated, as if it was some idle political plaything of a society gone mad on war. I knew that America would never invest the necessary funds or energies in rehabilitation of its poor, so long as adventures like Vietnam continue to draw men and skills and money, like some demonic destructive suction tube. So I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and to attack them as such. Perhaps a more tragic recognition of reality took place, and it became clear to me that the war was doing far more than devastating the hopes of the poor at home. It was sending their sons and their brothers and their husbands to fight and to die in extraordinarily high proportions relative to the rest of the population. We were taking the black young men who had been crippled by our society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Holland. So we have been repeatedly faced with the cruel irony, watching Negro and white boys on TV screens. They kill and die together for a nation that has been unable to seat them together in the same schools. So we watched them in brutal solidarity dropped in Chicago. I could not be silent in the face of such cruel manipulation of the poor. In 1957, when a group of us formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we chose as our motto to save the soul of America. We were convinced we could not limit our vision to certain rights for black people, but instead affirmed the conviction that America would never be free or saved from itself until the descendants of its slaves were loosed completely from the shackles they still wear. In a way, we were agreeing with Langston Hughes, that black Bob Holland, who had written earlier, "Oh yes, I say it plain, America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be." But I wish to go on now to say something even more disturbing. The war in Vietnam is but a symptom of a far deeper malady within the American spirit. I am convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. Hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism. This powerful commitment, we shall boldly challenge the status quo and unjust mores, thereby sweep the day when every valley shall be exalted and every mountain and hill shall be made low. Yes. Crooked shall be made straight and the rough places plain. That is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. Tied in the affairs of men does not remain at flood airs. We may cry desperately for time to pause in the passage, but time is adamant to every plea and rushes on over the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations, written the pathetic words too late. If we do not act, we shall surely be dragged down the long, dark, and shameful corridors of time, reserved for those who possess power without compassion, might without morality, and strength without psyche. If we will only make the right choice, we will be able to transform this pending cosmic elegy into a creative song of peace. We will make the right choice. We will be able to transform the genuine discourse of our world into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. If we will but make the right choice, we will be able to speed up the day all over America and all over the world, when justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.